All right, y'all, I think we'll go ahead and get started. How's everyone doing today? Good, okay. Better than your average 2 o'clock tour. It's sometimes hit or miss because people are full after lunch and then they get sleepy and they're a little tired coming here, but really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to come visit Tulane. My name's Owen Knight. I'm one of our directors here in the office. I oversee marketing and communications, so social media, emails, print pieces, all of that sort of stuff. I'm a Tulane alum, graduated here in 2014 and loved my experience as a student, obviously, and have been working here since I graduated, so I'm finishing up my 10th recruitment cycle. I always feel a little awkward bringing this next part up, but someone already asked. In case I do look vaguely familiar to any of you, I was on Survivor about a year and a half ago, so if anyone was like, I've seen that guy somewhere, that is where you saw me. I know people are sometimes afraid to ask because they don't want to be like, ask some random Asian guy if they're Owen from Survivor, but that is me. So yeah, I did survive. Spoiler alert, I did not win. Otherwise, I might not be here right now. Who knows? But in all seriousness, I think if I had one, I would still be here because I really, really love my job. I think part of the reason I love it so much is because I hated sitting through this. I really did not enjoy touring colleges, so I do empathize with you, and I'm very grateful that you chose to visit Tulane. Is anyone visiting like multiple schools over this like holiday week or this time off of school? A couple of you, okay, good luck. Anyone do one over the summer or planning one for this spring break or this summer, doing a little road trip action? Okay, a couple of you. I did that the summer before my senior year, and I don't mean to scare you. I just want to prepare you. It was probably the worst week of my life. You go, and I'm from the DC area to start off, and my mom's family lives outside Mobile, Alabama, so for some reason we decided to visit Grandma that summer. We would drive to Alabama and look at a bunch of schools in the Carolinas, which by the way is out of the way when you're driving to Alabama, so it was already kind of a silly idea, but we go and we drive to all these places and they show some overproduced video with their most attractive students ever. Someone comes out and cracks a couple jokes and tells you your SAT score isn't good enough and that it's going to cost $500,000 to come here. And then you go out on the tour, you get really sweaty, you don't remember anything, and then you get back in the car and you rinse and repeat and you do it again. And I just remember feeling very overwhelmed when I left that week of college visits. I went into my senior year almost with more questions. Like certainly there were some elements of schools I liked and I disliked, but overall I was just like, oh my God, like this is a lot. So it was actually something the Tulane guy said when he visited my high school that really resonated with me. And he said that there are no bad schools, there are only bad fits. And I took that to mean like you can get a piece of paper that grants you access to all these jobs and opportunities and this education. You can get a nice piece of paper from probably 1,000 different places. But for each student, there's only maybe, a handful of schools that really allow you to grow in the way that you're supposed to and that you want to and become the version of yourself you want to be, to allow you to explore not only academically, but socially through your extracurriculars, through research, and then of course doing that in a literal environment that suits you. I think it's really important to think about all of those. So the way I structure my presentations as you're thinking about this immersive 4-year experience you're about to start is starting with academics, moving on to student life, and then talking about our location here in New Orleans. Those are kind of the 3 main topics we're going to cover today. Should take us about 3 or 4 hours or so. So you scared me a little. I told that joke a couple Saturdays ago and no one laughed, not even a chuckle at all. And I was just like, who hurt you? Like why are you ready for this? No, we'll be in here for about 20, 25 more minutes and then you'll go out on the tour. If you have questions after, feel free to come back to the admission office, talk to me, any of my colleagues, any of our student workers to get all your unanswered questions answered. So academically, Tulane is a medium-sized major research university. So the major research university title kind of covers 2 main characteristics. Number 1, the research, unsurprisingly, which I'll get to in a second. And then the second being the academic breadth of our programming. So here at Tulane, we have 5 undergraduate colleges that house about 70, 75 majors. You can actually see all of them on the back of the packets you got when you checked in. You'll see at the top there, the 5 schools are science and engineering, liberal arts, business, public health, architecture. Those are the 5 schools. The important thing to remember, especially if you're a rising senior, I want you to hear me when I say this. You are not applying to one of the 5 schools I just listed out. You are applying to Tulane University, and if you get in, you get into all 5 schools. You get into all 75 majors. You can do literally anything you want if you come to school here. You have until the end of your second year to declare a major, and you're also able to double major, triple major, major and a minor, or even pursue a dual degree with majors in 2 of our schools. We actually have one of our student workers named Jillian, who is a senior this year. She is doing a triple major with business management, legal studies in business, and dance. And she is finishing in 4 years. A couple years ago, we had a girl graduate, Kennedy Walker from Louisiana. She did neuroscience and dance as her dual degree. I personally came in as an undecided business student, switched to the psychology program, took on the teacher certification program. Spring of freshman year, I got to take this wonderful class called Education in a Diverse Society. Fall of sophomore year, we took classroom management and lesson planning. And then I said I didn't want to be a teacher anymore. And I switched back. I went crawling back to the business school, declared a marketing major, a management major, and then I used that year in psych to get a psych minor. And I finished in 4 years with 2 majors and a minor. It is very, very user-friendly here. And this is something that I'm really personally passionate about. I had a close family friend go to a different institution in their engineering school. He found out pretty quickly his brain is not an engineer's brain. His GPA was not that hot. After a year, he wanted to transfer into the business school at his institution, and they wouldn't let him because of his GPA. And then he had to transfer. He ended up transferring twice. And this poor kid, his early 20s, got messed up because, God forbid, as an 18-year-old, he didn't know what he wanted to do for the next 40 years. Like, I think it's ridiculous how many colleges punish you for just exploring, trying different things. Like, that should be encouraged at a college, in my opinion. So I don't want to get too into the weeds on this, but I'd encourage you to ask your tour guide about the core curriculum, what courses they've taken. Because here at Tulane, the core is not telling you have to take specific classes. It gives you different categories, and within each category, you could have 30, 40, 50 different classes that check that box for you. So that allows you to try a ton of different stuff and figure out what you're good at, what you enjoy. The second element of being a research university, I mentioned the research. So we're classified as an R1 institution by Carnegie. This is an organization that evaluates the funding going into schools, the facilities on campus, the research output, and they rank those in terms of different clusters, and they have us in their top tier. So an R1 is the terminology. So top 2% of schools nationally. We have 93 different research centers here on campus, about $200 million a year coming in research funding, and you can get into a lab as early as your freshman year here at Tulane. Because compared to a lot of other R1 institutions that have this research capability, that have this academic flexibility, that have Division I athletics like we do, Tulane is a lot smaller than most of these schools. You know, a lot of the schools we're thinking of in this R1 category, 20, 30,000 students for undergrad, we're just at 8,200. So you're in a much more medium-sized environment. The average class size here is only 20. Our student to faculty ratio is 8-to-1. So you're in a very intimate environment. So if you're at a public school currently, like I was, you know, it's a breath of fresh air. You're really able to get to know your professors better. You're going to have more discussion in the classroom. Or if you currently go to a private high school, it's a lot of the same. You're going to have a very similar academic experience. I mean, half the reason we walked halfway across the quad to get into this room for this session is because we have very few big classrooms on this campus. The largest class we have here is about 170 kids, right? You're not in those 300-400 person lectures here at Tulane. So you're really able to get to know the faculty well. And I found that the faculty here at Tulane, they're really down to earth. They're really, really impressive, obviously. Upwards of 80% of them have terminal degrees in their fields, you know, masters, PhDs and whatnot. But as I've lived here for 14 years and worked here for 10 and gotten to know a lot of professors, like I've realized like they all have personality. They're all fun, normal, down-to-earth, approachable people. And I've realized you don't choose to further a career in academia in New Orleans and at Tulane if you take yourself too seriously. Like if you're too serious of a person. Like you need to be able to have a little fun, be approachable. Like our professors, they might have PhDs in neuroscience, but they're also riding in Mardi Gras crews or throwing crawfish boils at their house for students. And it's just a very like approachable, warm kind of rapport between our students and the faculty. That can be said the same for our students. So kind of shifting gears into student life here. The students here, I've tried to synthesize it over the years, and this year I finally came up with a one-liner that I think sums it up perfectly. Tulane kids are simply less annoying about being smart. That's really what it boils down to. Is like Tulane kids are intrinsically motivated. They like to learn. They're not embarrassed about being smart, but being smart is not their whole personality. They're not going to quit their instrument. They're not going to quit their sport. They're going to do things that make them happy. And yes, they're going to work as hard as they can, but they're not going to sob if they get a B+ in something, right? Like it's so counter to what my high school experience was. Like how many of you would you say go to a competitive high school? Probably most of you, if I had to venture a guess, right? Like my high school was so competitive, they wrote a book about it called The Overachievers and how toxic my high school was. And every single day, it's just like, oh, when'd you get on the AP Chem test? Like, are you applying to Cornell? Like, when'd you get on the ACT? I got a 35. And it's just like constant comparison all the time. And here it just really felt like a breath of fresh air. Like people are not trying to step on you on the way to the top. They are trying to support you and foster an environment where you can all succeed and all support each other. And it just feels really nice to know that you're around a bunch of smart people and like you're never gonna be the smartest person in a room, but no one else in the room is trying to make you feel dumb. And that was the biggest difference for me compared to my high school. I really, really loved that. Our students are coming from all over the country to be here and all over the world. We have about 60 different countries on campus. We're currently at 49 states. If anyone's from North Dakota, like come find me after. I have a proposition for you. But yeah, we're almost covering the whole country and a lot of the world. And one of my favorite stats is that the average Tulane student is 900 miles away from home when they are here on campus. And to me, that signals that Tulane students are very adventurous. Like they are buying in. Like no one really accidentally comes to Tulane. Right? Like I think people are very intentional about their decision to come here. We look for that in the admission process. Students really like try to get a sense of our personality when they're applying. And so you end up with a student body who's very engaged and involved. Like our students are involved in a multitude of activities. Feels like everyone does 4, 5, 6 different clubs. And it's just a really positive, like just inclusive environment here on our campus. Like speaking of inclusivity, just from my experience to today, just talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's been really cool for me to see over the course of 14 years. Because when you're a student, you're only here for 4, it's hard to see huge changes. But for me, my graduating class that graduated 10 years ago this spring, oh my God, we were 17% students of color, 1% international, and we didn't even track first generation status back then, if you're in the first in your family to go to college. Fast forward to today, we are 30% students of color in our freshman class, 7% of them are international, and 10% of them are their first in their family to go to college. So we are serving a much more ethnically, socioeconomically diverse group of students here at Tulane today than we were when I got here, and we have the support systems for them. Because those, like, I think a lot of institutions, they just try to cover as many bases as possible in one fell swoop, and then they don't end up serving people who have significant needs or certain needs. And so we see offices now like the Center for Academic Equity, the Office of Multicultural Affairs. And for us, like, for example, Office of Multicultural Affairs, when I was here, was tucked in a corner in the basement in the Student Center. And now they have a brand new office suite right next to the Center for Academic Equity. One example of what a program CAE does, like for first-gen students or lower-income students, they do a textbook lending library, they do grant funding, like if you got a cool unpaid summer internship, but your family can't afford to rent you an apartment in New York all summer, they'll help you out with that. So you're seeing a lot of different things that are helping to even the playing field and just make sure every single student, regardless of their family situation or their background, is able to take advantage of Tulane's benefits to the fullest, which I think is really cool. And I think a commonality amongst everyone at Tulane, I mentioned the engagement piece. I think an interest in service is a big one as well. Service at Tulane is built into our curriculum. You need to do at least 2 service experiences to graduate. And for us, it's really nice because our upper level, our second tier service, which you can ask your tour guides about, those are either an internship or tied in with a class. So with the classes, a famous example is the architecture students. They design and build a house every single year. It's called Urban Build. It's a really neat class where they do a design competition in the fall, and then the winning design, they actually go out and build it in the spring and sell it at cost to a first-time home buying family. One of my good friends, Justin, he stayed for 5 years and did a biomedical engineering master's. In his 4th year, they did a design course where they partnered with a nonprofit. He got partnered with the Gleason House, which is a nonprofit for people with ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease. It's founded by a former Saints player. Does anyone know who Steve Gleason is, out of curiosity? Okay, a couple people. So for the uninitiated, Steve Gleason is a kind of local legend. He played for the Saints. He was a reserve safety, special teams guy, his long blonde hair, and he famously blocked a punt in the game against the Atlanta Falcons, which was the first game back after Katrina. And we hate the Falcons with a burning passion. This is Monday Night Football, first game back. Very exciting moment for the city, very emotional night for the city. And Gleason blocks this punt. We return it for a touchdown. First touchdown since Katrina. It's like legendary. And there's paintings of this. There's a statue of this outside the Superdome. So Steve Gleason is very highly regarded. There's even a beer named after him in the city, which is a big honor for sure. And it's very sadly, after he retired, he was diagnosed with ALS. He's still alive and he's still involved in the community. One of the things he did was open this home that serves about 7 or 8 people with ALS. So my friend Justin got to go to the home and shadow there for about a month, and Justin got to know the patients and try to identify a problem they could serve with a device. And they found that a lot of these patients were having struggles daily with the tubing for their oxygen tanks, and it would get caught on corners and knotted up and kinked up and just stop working. So they created what they called the Smart Coil Tube Management System, and they designed it, they 3D printed it here on campus, they donated the prototypes to the home, and then they got a patent for the device. And you compare that year-long project to me in the suburbs picking up old chip bags by my high school, you can't really compare the two, right? It's so much more of an immersive experience. It's so much more of a collaborative experience. It's a lot different from a lot of the high school opportunities where you're just sending a check somewhere, you're going to Costa Rica for spring break, whatever. Like, those are perfectly fine things to do. Sorry if anyone went to Costa Rica. Those are perfectly fine things to do, but I think it's just a little bit more impactful when it's like here in your city, in your backyard, and you're joining something that already exists and not just like swooping in feeling like you're saving the day. You know what I mean? Like, it feels like it's a little more intentional, and that really exposes our students to a lot. Additionally, I think it's a really nice vehicle to get out of the Tulane bubble. And by that, what I mean, as you pulled up to campus today, you took the streetcar, you got your Uber, you hopped out here, you may have noticed you're not on Bourbon Street, right? Like, we are in a very residential part of the city. It's a lot more calm, quiet, cleaner than maybe some of you expected. Like, for people who have never been to New Orleans before, a lot of times their frame of reference is like Uncle Mark's stories from Mardi Gras in 1985, and that's all you have to go on. Like, you've never been here, you've never been for a conference or whatever, and most people have never been uptown before. So I love it because here, this neighborhood, it feels like a college town. We have a lot of local restaurants, a couple places to hang out. Audubon Park across the street is absolutely gorgeous. There's a lot to do here, but it's close enough to the city that you're not going to be bored. But it's far enough away that on a random Thursday, you're not going to have a bachelorette party like hooting and hollering outside the library, right? Like, you get that duality of having access to the city, but not being in the city. We still have all these amazing trees and green spaces, and it checked every box I wanted. Because for me, growing up in the suburbs, I knew I didn't want to live in the middle of nowhere, but I also didn't love like the downtown urban campuses that don't have a campus. I wanted both. And it's really functional when you live here. It's laid out nicely, as you'll see on the tour. And New Orleans is just so much fun. And I don't live under a rock. I know what people think. I know what people say about New Orleans. Oh, it's just a party city. Tulane's just a party school, whatever. And for me, like, I'm almost okay with that perception, because when you think about it, like, here's a piece of data for you. New Orleans has 135 festivals a year. Louisiana has almost 400. So every weekend there's something different going on. And I know I'm not convincing you that it's not a party city right now. But here's the thing, when you live in a place like this where there is so much to do, the FOMO factor, the fear of missing out, gets so much lessened compared to other places. Because say you're a student here, you have an exam on a Monday. Friday, you can't go out, you gotta stay in and study. Saturday, you got to skip the tailgate, watch the game on your computer at the library. Sunday, you can't go to Po' Boy Fest. You need to finish studying for that exam. Monday, you take your test. Guess what? Tuesday, you can go see Rebirth at the Maple Leaf. Wednesdays at the Square downtown in Lafayette Square. Thursday, there might be a Pelicans game. Friday, there's another concert. Saturday, there's another football game. It's not like you live in some podunk town in the middle of nowhere and you miss the Jamboree and then that was that, right? Like you've got so much going on. And with these festivals, just think about it. In the fall, you've got Po' Boy Fest, Fried Chicken Fest, Mac and Cheese Fest, Regular Cheese Fest. In the spring, we just had Mardi Gras, which you may have heard of. We've got Jazz Fest coming up, Craw Fest here on our campus. Over the summer, we do a running of the bulls, which is a recreation of the bull run they do in Spain, except it's roller derby girls that chase you with these big red bats. It's ridiculous. Like there is something different happening every single weekend here, and you're never out of interesting things to do. And the thing is, and finally getting to my point, none of the things I just listed require alcohol to be fun. Like if live music, warm weather, world-class food, and being outdoors is so terrible, don't come to school here. Like I can't make that interesting to you. But if it was me and if I had a child, I would rather that they live in an interesting place and do interesting cultural things instead of just going to frat parties in the same 2 bars for 4 years. I don't know. That's just me. And it's hard to explain that to people. It took me a couple minutes to do that now. And even still, like, people just don't take New Orleans seriously. And I think I'm okay with it. I've come to terms with it. Like I have a close friend who went to Harvard for undergrad, and his mom is involved in local politics, and she's kind of a serious person. She always asks me how things are going in New Orleans because she refuses to call it New Orleans. Like she just doesn't pronounce it right. And I'm convinced she thinks that I live on Bourbon Street and I start every morning with a hurricane and I wander around and like play a banjo and then get a hand grenade for lunch and then just finish my day at 6 to 17 bars, right? Like I don't think she thinks this is a real place, and that's fine. Like our cost of living is lower. We don't have as much traffic. We have all this amazing accessibility to so many cultural things. And as a student, it is the perfect college town. It is so nice. And quite honestly, another reason to not come here is if you hate your family. Because if you come here, your parents are going to find a way to visit here as frequently as possible. They'd much rather come to New Orleans than some random college town in the middle of nowhere. I can promise you that. So if you don't like your family, just be careful. Just be careful. Think about it. But for me, just to kind of wrap everything up here, and actually before that, I do want to talk about outcomes a little bit, just because, you know, you talk about all the fun things that are happening here and the experience you have for 4 years, but after that, I really think New Orleans and Tulane are perfectly positioned to where you have a lot of options as a student and when you're graduating, because for us, our academic strengths are very diverse. You know, we're known for our neuroscience program, our finance program, our architecture program, pre-med, pre-law, political science, international development. It's not just one industry, and it's not just one part of the country either. When you graduate or you're looking for a summer internship, you're not just going to be deciding between New Orleans and your hometown. One story I love to tell really quickly, one of my former students, Maddie, she's from New Jersey, came here to study film, digital media practices. She got an internship at Sony through a Tulane alum who's a VP over there. She moved to Los Angeles for the summer before her senior year, worked in casting at Sony, ended up graduating from the DMP program, moved to LA. First time in California was that previous summer, had never been further west than Louisiana, moved out to LA, worked her way up at William Morris Endeavor, moved over to Rian Johnson's production company during the time where he was doing a lot of the Star Wars movies and Knives Out, ended up moving to Apple TV, got to work on some really cool shows there. And then I got lunch with her I guess it was 2 Octobers ago. So it's almost been 2 years. She's been a full-fledged TV producer, reading pilots, reading scripts. She's no longer anyone's assistant. And she's, I think, 28 years old. And that connection, like she could not have ever thought of going to LA, but Tulane opened that door for her. And I'm not saying Tulane's the only school that could, but I think Tulane is one of the places where alums that are successful in all these industries around the country will do backflips to help a current Tulane student. They will be excited to help a current Tulane student. Like the Tulane Alumni Network, we might be smaller than like a Michigan or Ohio State or Bama or wherever, but they are really passionate about this city and about this school. And my theory to this is because we only very recently became a football school. For a very long time, our sports were horrendous, and our alums had to love Tulane for deeper reasons than just football. And now they get that on top of all the other reasons they love Tulane. It's a really fun time for them, and they're excited to kind of pay it forward to the current Tulane students. So to wrap everything up now, for me, it's probably become apparent over the last 20 minutes that I absolutely loved going to school here. I would not trade it for anything. I think the kicker for me is that Tulane is extremely versatile, Regardless of where you're from, what your background is, what you want to study, where you see yourself going 4 or 5 years from now, you can do anything here and be exposed to a lot of different, interesting, smart, fun people, and you get to do it in New Orleans. And I loved it, can't emphasize that enough. So if this sounds good to you, I do want to give you a couple tips for your application, because I know probably most of you are juniors currently getting ready to apply next year. So a couple quick things. This is all on like the second or third to last page of the book, by the way, but the deadlines we're looking at. We have early decision on November 1st. We have early action on November 15th. We have early decision 2 in January. We have regular decision at the end of January. Be honest, how many of you have heard that you can only get into Tulane if you do early decision? How many of you have heard that? Okay, a couple of you. Valid that you have heard that, but I want to tell you that is false. Like genuinely, that is false. This year, we actually admitted fewer ED students than we did the previous last year and the year before. So we're at an all-time low for ED1, and in total, our ED percentage is probably looking to be about 10% less than when it peaked a few years ago. So early action, the non-binding option due November 15th, is still very viable. That is my general recommendation to do. Early action gives you the advantage of applying early, but the flexibility of not being bound. Full disclosure, if you're on the fence between early action and early decision, I need you to know that early decision has less merit scholarship available. Doing the binding option reduces your chances at getting a merit scholarship because it's a different and smaller pool of money. So if you're a really strong student academically, I might do early action, show a lot of interest, hope you get a nice merit scholarship. Or if you're a little more nervous about how your academics stand up, maybe do early decision to maximize your chances of getting in. Does that make sense? Are you all following? Okay, because when we read an application, there's 3 hurdles you need to jump over to be a serious contender. The first hurdle is your academics. Obviously, that's the most important. So we're looking at your transcript. We are test optional. We will look at scores if you send them, but it does not hurt you to not send scores. Does not hurt you to not send them. I would say do not send anything below a 32 or below like a 1450. At that point, you're kind of below our averages. There's no value being added to your application that way. With your transcript, we want to see a balance of rigor and performance. We want to see that you're challenging yourself when it's appropriate. You certainly don't need to take 25,000 AP courses or whatever, but you want to be challenging yourself where it's appropriate. Our average GPA is somewhere in like the low 3.7 ballpark, so a mix of A's and B's is typically typical. That's redundant. Typical on our transcripts that we're admitting. And also, if your school eliminated APs, doesn't have IBs, whatever, that is not going to hurt you. That is not your fault. The curriculum of your high school, it's within context of your specific high school. We also don't put caps on high schools or states or towns or anything like that, so you're not competing against your friends. Second thing, the personal stuff. We just want to see that you bring something to campus, and we truly do not care what that is. We don't have a list that ranks extracurricular activities from like, research to French horn to diving to lacrosse. Like we don't rank them and we don't care what you do. If you've joined a bunch of clubs that you don't like doing just to look fancy for college, you should probably quit them if you don't actually like them. Like no one's getting into college because they joined the French club for a year and a half. Like it's just not the way it works. Like we want to see who you are, what you're passionate about, and what you would bring to our community. So whether that's service or a job or family responsibilities or sports, doesn't matter. We just want to see that basically that you're not just sitting on your phone all day, every day. That we can also see through your personal statements and then the optional Why Tulane essay, which brings me to the third thing you need to do to get in, which is show interest. And you're all doing that right now. Congratulations, you've come and taken a tour. But I will remind you, taking a tour is not the only way to show interest. You can come see us if we go to your high school, if we do an info session in your town, all the virtual events we do. And I intentionally called these hurdles instead of like a pole vault or something, because it's not a competition of who can get the highest. It's about getting over that jump. That means that you need to inspire enough confidence in the person reading your application that they feel good about the fact that you would probably come here if you got in. Does that make sense? Like we don't need to know 100% for sure beyond the shadow of a reasonable doubt or whatever, but we need to be able to look ourselves in the mirror and take ourselves seriously when we talk about you to the committee and to the dean of admission. We need to feel confident that, you've seriously thought about it. Does that make sense? Okay, so those three things: academics, personal interests, whatever round works for you. Everyone's considered for a merit-based scholarship, and then we are also generous with need-based aid through the FAFSA and the CSS profile. And at the end of the day, it's about 3/4 of our students are not paying full price to come to school here. So I know that total cost at the back is a little eyebrow-raising, very, very validly so, but that's not the reality of what most people are paying. So definitely apply. We are on the Common App. It's free to apply, and then you're automatically considered for those scholarships as well. But I've been talking long enough. I'm going to get your tour guides. I really, really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule and also being on this film that will be in here for forever. But thank you very much. And if you have questions after, feel free to come back after the tour as well. But thank you. I'll go grab your tour guides.